An old name will be back at the Rugby World Cup in 2027 as Zimbabwe became the latest team to book their tickets to Australia. The Sables lived up to expectations and defended their Rugby Africa Cup title, securing the continent's only automatic qualification spot. It is a welcome return for a country that, depending on how far back you want to go, has a rich and storied rugby heritage. In fact, if you want to go back before they were known as Zimbabwe, back when the country was called Rhodesia, they were regular opponents for modern Tier 1 nations. In fact, right up until the 70s, whenever the British and Irish Lions would go down to play South Africa, they often made a stop-off in Rhodesia, and Rhodesia even beat them once. Rhodesia's victories against modern Tier 1 nations also include Argentina, Italy, and in 1949, the New Zealand All Blacks. Now, I don't want to big up that result too much because the racial laws in Rhodesia at the time make that game quite problematic. In this game, the All Blacks were not allowed to field any players of Maori descent. The reason for this is those players were classed as players of colour. And back then, not only were people of colour not allowed to play for Rhodesia, they were not allowed to play against Rhodesia. Now, this is not a geopolitical history channel, so I'm not going to go into it too much. I'll let you get educated on the history of Zimbabwe in your own time. Zimbabwe played their first test match under their current name in 1981 against Kenya. They were invited to take part in the first ever Rugby World Cup in 1987, awarded the African spot while South Africa were banned from the competition due to apartheid. They qualified for the competition again in 1991, but are yet to win a game, a 1-point defeat to Romania being their best results to date. Sadly, as the political and economic situation in Zimbabwe worsened, many of their top players emigrated and left the country. In fact, if you dig through rugby history, you can find many players of Zimbabwean descent who represented other nations with great distinction. In fact, I also heard a rumour that Lorenzo Julius of the Sharks is Zimbabwean qualified. I don't know if that's true. If it is, someone let me know in the comments down below. There followed a period of steep decline for Zimbabwean rugby and they dropped to near the bottom of Rugby Africa. But they started seeing a revival in the 2010s, winning the competition in 2012 and have now won back-to-back titles. In fact, I am reassured by social media that Zimbabwe are on the longest winning streak in Test rugby with 13 straight victories. The caveat to that being they haven't played anyone ranked in the top 20. This week, as part of the Megaphone Rugby podcast, I was lucky enough to speak to a journalist who knows plenty about Zimbabwean rugby. I asked him to tell me all about their revival.
I think it started in the boardroom. I think there were strong voices that started to say, listen, we need to get serious again to play decent rugby and to qualify for the World Cup. There was definitely a few seasons where they kind of went through the motion and you could see that they're not well coached, they're not well resourced and didn't really try to even win the African Cup of Nations. I think it started in the boardroom. There was a plan. They got the right people in. They actually had the former Springbok coach, Peter de Villiers, that also coached there for a year. He made a big impact there also to get the structures and believing and just putting a little bit of a different edge on it and the international feel to them. So that was one component, I think, the first one. And then Peter Bernardi, the coach, he's a good coach, knows his rugby. And then they got Gert Smal, that was also assistant coach to the Springboks and with Ireland. Just to put it maybe in context, the biggest loss for Zimbabwe against African countries besides South Africa is 80 points to 6. That was against Namibia in 2015. So it's not long ago, 10 years ago. And since then, they've made massive strides. They've got a big focus for a few years now to try and qualify for the World Cup.
Their last game against Namibia in the Rugby Africa final was an absolute thriller. There was a lot of rugby on that day, and this was, in my opinion, by far the most exciting match. Zimbabwe looked to have had it sewn up multiple times. Every time you thought they were safe, though, they would make a mistake and let Namibia back in. Namibia's famous long-range kicker Swanepoel also had a shot at goal late on, but it drifted agonisingly wide. And eventually the game was won thanks to a scrum penalty, sparking scenes of absolute jubilation. Their goal kicker Ian Pryor was named the MVP of the entire tournament. By my maths, he recorded 52 points in just 3 games. Hey, so after I recorded the main body of this video, I actually found an interview with Ian Pryor shortly after the Africa Cup victory. In it, he gives more details about Zimbabwe's rapid improvements. He says, about 18 months ago, they got together and came up with a plan, believing there was enough talent in Zimbabwe and sprinkled around the world to put together a really competitive side, if we could get some guys to come back and work hard and spend more time together. He then goes on to reference the Rugby Nations Championship, which will kick off in 2026. Having won the Africa Cup, Zimbabwe have now qualified for the second tier of that competition, where they'll play against the likes of Georgia, Samoa Tonga, Uruguay, Chile. Pryor said that getting more frequent tests and implementing a structure for home-based players that allows them to go all the way from the under-16s through to the Sables without having to go overseas to chase Test rugby is really important. By the way, if you are enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel and giving the video a like. I'm well on the way to 6,500 subscribers, and I would love it if you were along for the ride too. Anyway, let's get back to the main video. Now sadly, for every winner in sport, there has to be a loser. And in this case, the rise of Zimbabwe has meant the fall of Namibia. Namibia had dominated Rugby Africa for a decade and have been an ever-present at the Rugby World Cup since 1999. Now, they'd never won a game at the Rugby World Cup, but they had been showing signs of progress. They could have won a game in 2019 had their match against Canada not been called off thanks to a typhoon, and they scored their most points ever in a game against Uruguay in 2023 when coached by former Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee. It was a big shock when they lost the Rugby Africa title last year, a real upset in the semi-finals. And sadly, it does seem to speak to some off-field issues in Namibian rugby. Their qualification campaign got off in the worst possible way when they took a 70-point battering off a touring Italian side. To make matters worse, their head coach then walked out just days before the start of the Rugby Africa Cup, citing work commitments. And that meant that the director of rugby, Namibian legend Jacques Burger, had to step in to take control.
Building up to, it was a little bit before the Italy game already. It was when they played Uganda in a friendly game. Some of the journalists picked up that the coach that was appointed, Crescanda Botha is his name, he's also a former player, so they didn't see him at the training. So I think in Namibian rugby they could have handled it better in communicating that earlier. It ended up that the journalists started asking, where is the coach? The reason was given as it's because of work commitments. That's not really confirmed if that was the reason, but we accept it. There was rumours that he maybe wanted a little bit more control over the coaching role. I don't think it was that Jacques Burger just dominated the process, but there was a little bit of speculation of that, but it's unconfirmed, so it's just me kind of talking around it a little bit, but the official one was that's work commitments. The problem for Namibia mainly is that just your player pool is a small pool to pick from, so that is really a challenge.
Their World Cup hopes aren't over though. They've got a playoff against the UAE to secure a place in the final qualification tournament. By the time you see this video, that match will have happened, so here's Future Hugh to tell you the result. Was it an easy win? We're all expecting an easy win. Now, the 24-team World Cup still divides opinion. A lot of people are very worried about some of the lopsided results that they're expecting to see when these lower-ranked nations play against the likes of the All Blacks or Ireland or South Africa. Whether you agree with that or not is up to you, but one thing I will say is, having watched Zimbabwe, they are going to be a massive breath of fresh air at this tournament. Even if they're on the receiving end of some serious hiding, they are going to be such fun to watch. They are such a vibrant group of players. So I hope you found this video, if nothing else, thought-provoking. If you did, please leave those thoughts in the comment section down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.